Thank you very much for your invitation to speak to you today. I'm very sorry I cannot be there with you, but as you may understand, there are some big problems in Italy and my flight had been cancelled. Anyway, technology allows me to speak to you in this very unusual form, for me at least. Today I'm going to speak to you about the topic of computer assisted interpreting. I will give you a broad overview about the state of the art um, of this topic and point to some future perspectives that we may experience in the years to come. First of all, I'd like to start putting into perspective uh, computer assisted interpreting into the broader area of intersection between technology and interpreting. We have three main areas where technology and interpreting come together. We have machine interpreting, remote interpreting, and computer assisted interpreting. I put them in this order because I think this is the order of importance, not now, but in the years to come. At first place, we have machine interpreting, which will, in my opinion, influence even human interpreting, professional interpreting. This, even if machine interpreting aims at replacing human interpreters. Then we have remote interpreting. This is probably the topic that is being discussed the most in the area of technology and interpreting. You can see in the program of your very interesting conference that many of the slots are dedicated to remote interpreting. Remote interpreting has to do with the setting, with the delivery of the interpreting service. Then we have a smaller area of intersection between technology and interpreting, and is computer-assisted interpreting. Computer-assisted interpreting has to do with the process. Process means every area in which interpreting is happening from the very beginning, meaning preparation, till the actual act of interpreting, for example, in the booth. Computer-assisted interpreting and computer-assisted software is a kind of interpreting which is assisted by computer, by tools, by the K tools. It has to do in particular with information. K tools have to do with information. In, as I said before, every phase of the workflow and with different kind of information, linguistic information, factual information, and so on. So it's important to understand that K tools are tools that support interpreters in doing their usual work. Of course, if the core of K tools is information, at least in my opinion, there are other tools that can be regarded as K tools. An example is our digital tablets, digital notepads, used more often now than in the past to take notes for consecutive assignments, for example. This is becoming quite popular. Then you have different experimental settings that use tools, computer to be performed. For example, consecutive simultaneous, which is a mix of the two. A text that would be normally interpreted in consecutive mode, but gets recorded and then gets interpreted in a simultaneous way. This is very experimental. It's actually quite old, but it's a part of the K-tool area. Then we have, of course, other smaller areas which have little to do with the process of interpreting, but with uh, areas around it. For example, the interpretation management systems used by agencies or international institutions to manage the conferences, the interpreters, language combination, and so on. I'm talking about K-tools. Why are we talking about K-tools? Uh, Quite interesting to know is that K-tools have been around for years. I started working on K-tools probably 10 years ago, but at that time there was zero interest. It's only about a couple of years, 1, 2 years, that the interest of the community for K-tools has increased a lot. There are several reasons for this. I would just point to two reasons. On the one side, we have tools, not many, I have to say, but we have first K tools around. They are getting better and better. On the other side, we have a pressure on from society to embrace technologies. We have not to forget that embracing technologies doesn't come always from the need inside the profession, in our case, but it's often a response to an external pressure. And at the moment, with technology being used in any aspect of our life and in any profession, practically, there is a sense of pressure on the community to embrace and use technology for their advantage. So this combination has given the topic of K-tools quite a prominent role, even if it's secondary to the remote interpreting, as I said before. K-tools, as I said before, have to do with information. They streamline the interpreting workflow from the preparation to the interpreting process proper, for example, in the booth. They make information reusable. They help support interpreters in preparing an event, especially if this event is specialized, helping them to create glossaries, to gain knowledge about a specific topic. And if we think about the prominent role of preparation in interpreting, we know how important this is and how helpful or potentially helpful K-tools can be to help interpreters to prepare better and to perform better while interpreting. Of course, K-tools, another area of their use is to simplify the access to information for interpreters. Today I will speak about K-tools in general, but I will concentrate myself on one K-tool in particular, which is Interpret Bank. Why? There are two reasons. The first reason is because I created Interpret Bank with my team at the University of Mainz in Germany years ago, and I know the tool quite good. And the second reason, it's because it's the most famous and widespread K tool at the moment, and I have to say the most advanced one. A couple of information about Interpret Bank. As I said before, it's been created at the University of Mainz in Germersheim in Germany. We are releasing now version number 7, which is the result of years of development and feedback from users and companies around the world. This is very important because we collect information and develop further our ideas thanks to the feedback of the users. Interpret Bank is a startup, so it's a commercial software at the moment, which finances itself, its development through the license. What is very important for me at least is the strong tie that Interpret Bank has with the academia. We have a lot of research partnerships with my university and other universities, and I will point to this aspect later in my presentation. But for me, it's very important because Interpret Bank has been created inside the university as a university project, and its main focus is to try to understand what's happening to interpreting through the use of K-tools, what will happen in the future. I said before that a K-tool is used in different stages of the interpreting workflow. Our impression is that more or less 80% of the time of users using a K-tool is dedicated to the preparation of an event, and a smaller portion, at least at the moment, is dedicated to the access of information, which is normally glossaries, specialized terminology, during interpreting. So maybe the relation is 80 to 20. This could change in the future, as I will tell you later. What does it mean preparing for a conference with a K-tool? Well, as I told you before, K-tool has to do with information, with knowledge mining and knowledge management. A K-tool organizes information in glossaries and databases and puts together all information that an interpreter collects in the phase of preparation in a unique place. We have terminology, we have preparatory texts, documents, and from this combination, a K-tool, a modern K-tool, can extract terminology automatically or semi-automatically, can suggest possible translation to a given term. I'm talking about the preparation phase, while we are collecting terminology, while we are trying to learn terminology and trying to understand terminology, how it's used in a specific context. A K-tool nowadays can generate automatic lists of terms. So you give the K-tool a topic, wind energy, for example, and the K-tool will give you a list of terms that are relevant for that specific subject. So it's a support in the creation of a terminology database for a specific event. The use of documents helps with, and the interaction between terminology and documents helps interpreters to understand the terminology, the topic. So it's not just simple glossary creation, but it is glossary creation with linguistic information, collocation extractions, collocation learning, with the need to understand the terms, the factual information around or behind terms, behind a topic. We know that this is paramount. This is knowledge mining and management. At the moment, it's quite simple how it is done, but later I will tell you the road that we are going to make this more intense. Here is a screenshot of the Windows version of Interpret Bank. You see just a glossary without any extra fields. You can, of course, record extra information behind the term and its translation in English and French. You can have more languages. On the lower part, you see a text with highlighted terminology and so on. There are many, of course, features. I can't explain any feature now. Then we have, again, in the phase of learning or preparing an event, a topic, the glossary memorization, which was for us a game, so to say, when we developed this. But we've seen that interpreters really enjoy this feature. This feature is actually very simple. It's a flashcard system. you can see it on a cell phone or on the computer, that ask you the terminology. It's very memorization utility, but it has also functions like putting the terms in a real context, sentences taken out of the preparatory documents automatically. Everything is done automatically to allow the interpreter to memorize, to see how the word or the term is used in a real context, in the real context of a specific subject. So that we're trying to make the learning, linguistic and knowledge learning together. Then, of course, when you have prepared your terminology, you have learned your vocabulary, you can access your terminology even in the booth. This might sound strange for many of you, especially for the people that are not accustomed to use a computer in the booth while interpreting. However, I will show you later some results from the research, from empirical research, pointing at that it's possible in some circumstances to use a computer even while interpreting. I stress the word in some circumstances. What does it mean, accessing the terminology even in the booth? It means that you are in the booth. If you look at the booth nowadays, I would say 70% of the people have a laptop, have an iPad or something like that in the booth. They look up things while they are having breaks, while the colleague is interpreting, or in some circumstances, even while they are interpreting. And a K tool tries to make this more user-friendly, putting together all the information that an interpreter may need in a specific moment, in a specific assignment, and make the effort that the interpreter needs to look up something very small. So it's not a dictionary lookup, which takes time and efforts. It's very distracting, but it tries to reduce the amount of cognitive load that you have to dedicate to this function. Again, it's not a question of looking up every other word in a database. Of course, it doesn't work. Interpreting is very different. But in some situations, when there is a need for terminology precision, when you don't know the specific term, when you can't use other strategies that we can use in interpreting, then we can resort to this kind of lookup system. Interpret Bank is a desktop application working on a computer, but it can also work on mobile devices like tablets and cell phones for use in other situations where you can't have your computer. And the idea is to reduce, as I said before, the amount of effort that the interpreter needs to use to look up something. And we are doing much more than this in the newest version in our research. And I will tell you now, because here you can see a user using Interpret Bank in the booth, big laptop in a small place. But what's interesting in this picture is that you have the computer with a glossary, and you have pen and paper, meaning, which is very important for me, meaning that technology is not a substitution for our habits, for other even more primitive technologies like a pen, and paper is a technology too. It's a complementary resource that can be used when the interpreter thinks it's right to use it. This is what we have now. I told you before that there are very few K tools on the market.
available. Actually, there are only 3 at the moment. One is Interpret Bank, the other one is Interpreters Help, and the oldest one is Interplex. So the interesting part about Interpret Bank is that it's a research project, so we're doing research and developing new ideas for K tools. What is happening now? Now it's happening that machine learning or artificial intelligence, if you want, is going into K tools. The other trend is more an academic string of trend is that we are assisting an increase of research, empirical research in the area of conference interpreting, especially conference interpreting with K tools. So I give you a couple of information about these 2 topics. Machine learning, I'm sure everyone knows what's machine learning. It's nothing else as computer or software that learns to do something without being explicitly programmed to do that, but they learn just by looking at a lot of data, and they learn to do things. What we are doing now is to take ideas from the machine learning world and put them to the service of users of K tools, of interpreters. What are we implemented right now into Interpret Bank? Well, first of all, the possibility to collect automatically preparatory texts. It means the user gives just the topic to the machine, for example, renewable energy, which is not very precise topic, but just to understand the concept, and the machine will find suitable texts that are suitable for preparing a conference. It's something like complementing the text that normally the conference organizer should give to the interpreter team. From these texts, we extract terminology automatically. This is something that Interpret Bank is already able to do now, but what's coming next is that this extraction of terminology is context aware. If you know very well that terminology changes depending on the context, the translations changes depending on the context. And now with machine learning, Interpret Bank or K tool become aware of the topic and extract terminology according to this. Not only this, but also according to the user. The more the user uses the tool, the better the results, because the machine learns to see what is interesting, what kind of terms are normally interesting for a specific interpreter, what terms are not interested for a specific interpreter, and the machine learns this. So the results of the terminology extraction is very specific for the specific user. The same applies to the creation of list of terms I introduced before, which is done now in a more precise way, taking into consideration the user's habits, the context, and so on. We have the possibility to summarize documents quite nicely so that the interpreter may have a gist of the content, of course, for example, to see if a document is interesting for him or for her to read in its entirety, and so on. And probably the most interesting part is the integration of automatic speech recognition to support interpreters with numbers, with terminology, and names, proper names. How it works, per se, it's quite simple. The computer listens to the original speech as the interpreter does and suggests in a prompt, numbers, terms, and so on. And the interpreter may look at this prompt if the interpreter needs a suggestion or not. I will show you an example of a live experiment, it's not an experiment, of Interpret Bank working with speech recognition.
The euro area economy has now been growing for 5 years, and we expect the expansion to continue in the coming years. We've recently seen a loss of growth momentum. In both of the last 2 quarterly ECB growth projections, our staff has revised down its estimates. Actual data have also been weak. The flash estimate for euro area growth in the first quarter was just 0.2%. The slowdown has raised questions about the strength of the growth outlook, and in turn, whether the ongoing convergence of inflation towards our objective will be sustained. I would like to address these questions in my remarks this morning.
As you could see, the computer prompted the interpreter with this kind of information. Now, I told you before I would spend a couple of minutes speaking about what's going on in research and K-tools. We are having a lot of projects with many universities around Europe at the moment, investigating what's K-tool about, how do they influence the interpretation. As far as I can say now, all empirical research points to an improvement of the quality of an interpreting, both if it's done through more time dedicated to corpus-based terminology preparation, for example, meaning working with this text extraction, terminology extraction algorithm, and so on. Then, in this case, researchers could show a slightly improvement in performance. The same applies quite very clearly to speech recognition, the support with speech recognition, where, for example, it's been proved that the quality of interpretation, for example, in text-rich numbers, has increased a lot with the use of this prompt system. Other results from the research, from the empirical research, is that you cannot start using such a system from now on without training. Using a prompt can be distracting, of course, so you have to learn how to use it, when to look at it. This is being demonstrated, shown in, I think, every single piece of empirical research done around the world until today. Another area quite interesting for me is the use of machine learning to understand live in real time when an interpreter may need help. This is a research done by Vogler and others using automatic speech recognition and trying to predict when the interpreter will need help, so that the prompts you've seen before are not shown for every number, for example, but only for the numbers that will pose a problem for the interpretation. So I think the time for me is over now. This was a very general introduction to the topic. If you're interested, try the several tools that are around. Read the papers, especially the empirical papers written on the topic, and try to see, to understand the pro and contra of using using K-tools in real life. Thank you very much, and sorry again for this presentation from a distant country. Thank you very much.